In this English lesson, I wanted to help you learn the English phrase, get it through your head. If I say to someone, you need to get it through your head, it means I want them to understand me and I want them to agree with me. As a parent, I often use this phrase. My kids eat bread. They make sandwiches from bread. And sometimes there's 1 or 2 slices of bread left in the loaf, and they'll open a new loaf of fresh bread instead of finishing the last 2 slices. You will then hear me as a dad say something like this to one of my children. You need to get it through your head that you need to eat the last 2 old slices of bread before you can open up a fresh new loaf of bread. So when you tell someone they need to get it through their head, or if you say you need to get it through your head, it means you want them to understand you and you want them to agree with you. The second phrase I wanted to teach you today is the phrase, it's all in your head. We use this phrase to talk about things that people are imagining and that aren't real. Maybe your brother thinks that your cousin doesn't like him. Maybe your brother says, well, my cousin, our cousin hasn't phoned me in a week. When I borrowed his car, and when I brought it back and said thank you, he didn't say you're welcome. I think our cousin doesn't like me anymore. And you could say, you know what? It's all in your head. That would mean that you think they're imagining it. You would think that your cousin likes them just fine and that it's not a problem. So when you say it's all in your head, you're basically saying, I think you're imagining that. So to review, if you say to someone, you need to get it through your head, you're basically saying, you need to understand what I'm saying and you need to agree with me. And if you say to someone, it's all in your head, you're basically saying, I think you're imagining what you think is true. Anyways, let's look at a comment from a previous video. This comment is from Julia, and Julia says this. Hi, dear teacher. Happy Monday, everyone. This is from yesterday, by the way, when it was Monday. It's definitely better to be asleep at the wheel while doing a job than while literally driving. Let me reread that. It's definitely better to be asleep at the wheel while doing a job than while literally driving. And my response was this, yes, for sure. It is really dangerous to literally fall asleep at the wheel while driving. You'll end up in the ditch, that's if you go off the road, or hitting someone. It's always better to pull over at a rest stop and buy a cup of coffee. So, thanks, Julia, for that comment. By the way, I absolutely agree with you that if you are asleep at the wheel at work, it's less dangerous. Well, it could be dangerous. But if you are literally asleep at the wheel in a car, that is really, really dangerous. So definitely a good time to pull over, stop, and maybe get a cup of coffee. I just wanted to explain the word literally. When we use the word literally when talking about English phrases, we mean what it actually means if you took every word at its actual meaning. So when you fall asleep at the wheel driving, it means that you're in a vehicle and you fall asleep while driving. When you fall asleep at the wheel at work, it's kind of a figurative example. You're not actually driving a vehicle. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about rest stops. On highways in Canada and in the United States, there are rest stops along the way. We call them rest stops here in Canada. When you pull over in a rest stop, you can buy gas, you can get food, you can go to the washroom, you can use bathroom, the word bathroom if you are learning American English. In Canada, we say washroom. But definitely when we go on a trip, we always plan to pull over at a rest stop along the way. And then we usually go to Tim Hortons. The kids all use the washrooms, and usually I put some gas in the van while we're there. So that's a pretty typical thing to do when you're driving on a highway in North America, is to pull over at a rest stop and get a little bit of food, go to the washroom, and get a little bit of gas.